We are both here live in the studio, which is great. Let's go. We've got a great lineup for us today. First off is Tim. Tim, welcome very much to Scaling Europe. How are you doing? Scaling Europe show. How are you doing today?
Great. Excited to be here and great to meet you.
Thank you very much for bearing with us. It's 10:14. We are here now. To kick things off, can you just give us kind of a quick intro into yourself and BGF?
Sure. So I have a technology background. I came to investing as an entrepreneur, kind of really slightly frustrated with dealing with investors and trying to figure out what they were thinking. So I took the leap, joined a venture capital fund, and I've been investing for about 25 years across a whole kind of range of different companies, technologies, stages, geographies, sectors, and found it endlessly exciting, interesting. I guess for the last 8 of those 25 years, I've been at BGF. So BGF is an unusual organization. It's not got your usual fund cycle. And for me, one of the things I found consistently frustrating with the venture capital model was the usual fund cycle where you've got people who are actively investing, but then they're not actively investing because they're out raising their next fund, and who knows when that's going to happen. And then you get the dynamic where it's tricky for some funds to support companies, especially some of the deep tech, hard companies across the full life cycle of the company because their fund times out. And the challenge of not being able to invest in a company from the last fund from your new fund because you can't cross support.
Yeah.
So I consistently found those factors frustrating, and it was interesting when I bumped into BGF because they have an evergreen fund structure. They have effectively capital on balance sheet for shareholders in the form of the 4 main UK banks, so very stable shareholder base. And a real desire in the organization, real mission to fill the gap in the market. And the original gap that BGF was focused on was supporting British SMEs. So typically in a year, we're deploying about 500 million pounds of capital. That's actually cash out the door each year. And 70% of that is that BGF core focus of supporting SMEs. And those are typically businesses that have already got to a pretty good place. They're usually profitable. And the question for those companies is, what do they do at the next stage? What does the next phase of growth look like? And BGF is often a part of the equation in stepping in and helping those companies kind of through that next phase. I played into it really with a proposition to say, it's really interesting capital base, really interesting mission. Maybe we could do something similar from an early stage investing perspective. And I kicked that off and had pretty much a blank sheet of paper to kind of think through where the opportunities were.
Super cool. And can you just explain the SMB focus a little bit more? That's really interesting and differentiated.
Yeah, so it's really interesting if you look at the private equity market and if you look at bank finance, and if you think about a company that is owner operated, that has got themselves to 20, 25 million of turnover, by default, because they've bootstrapped, they've almost always been break even or profitable. But they quite often get to a stage where there's a certain level of sophistication required in terms of the finance function, and a certain additional skill set that's required to kind of think, actually, how do I grow from this stage? Because it might involve international expansion, it might involve kind of expanding kind of your focus from a market perspective. And I think a lot of those businesses have traditionally struggled to access finance, because when they go to the bank says, show me your 3-year P&L forecast, and they don't have a finance director, or they just don't think in those terms. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting if you go back, if you talk to people who've been around for a while, they'll say, oh yeah, that's the Macmillan gap, i.e. something that we've known for a really long time. And so BGF is focused on filling that, and I think done a successful job of pioneering this idea of minority investment on the private equity kind of side of the equation.
But so you invest in startups that are filling that gap, or you invest in the SMBs to improve their operations,
The
basically.
BGF invests in those small and medium-sized businesses.
Wow, okay.
And that's about 70% of what we do. My part of the business, we invest about 100 million a year, and we're focused on kind of it doesn't, there's no continuity really between what we invest in and what the rest of BGF invests in. We just took a similar approach and said, from an early stage technology perspective, or an early stage investing perspective, where are there gaps in the market? And from a BGF mission perspective, where do we focus in terms of continuing to fill gaps in the market from a finance perspective?
And do you also do roll-ups, or do you try to invest in companies in the same, or SMBs in the same sectors?
So it's really, that's a super interesting question, because there's often a debate from a wider BGF perspective in terms of whether you're a generalist or a specialist. And because we do such high volume, I mean, if you look at a private equity house, they might do 3 or 4 deals a year. BGF, on the growth side, that kind of SME side, they're kind of doing maybe 40 deals a year. And if you add that up, we've got a portfolio of about 350 companies on that side of things. And we've probably got more companies in any sector, any given sector, than any specialist would have. So you end up, we often refer to the growth team as being multi-sector specialists.
How did you find the process of getting BGF to not just look at the SMBs, but also to kind of change their thesis and look at the early stage companies?
Yeah, it's a super question, because it wasn't straightforward. And although those two things are adjacent, it's just totally different worlds, because on that late stage side, you're evaluating a business based on its financials, and you're looking at the numbers, you're looking at, kind of the profit margin, and early stage is like, got no revenue. And so some of the later stage guys look at it, they don't even know where to start. And they can, understand the story and think, okay, kind of understand, maybe it turns into a business, but like, it's got nothing now. And so, completely different language. And it was a really interesting challenge to take the approach of thinking, actually, what is really good about this organization and what they do and how they do things? And how do you leverage those points as advantages in taking a different approach to supporting early stage companies, rather than just kind of fighting a battle over every single one. And so the things that come through in how we approach companies, I think we probably spend a lot more time projecting forward and trying to think, how does it turn into a real business? How does it create proper barriers to entry? What does it do today that is going to ensure that it's got great margins when it comes to actually, kind of operating financially? And, we also have the challenge, because we all have the same investment committee. It's a very generalist investment committee. And that creates a super interesting challenge for me on the deep tech or med tech side, where, the thing at investment committee before me might have been, a company in, kind of general manufacturing. And then I come along and I've got a med tech company. And that forces us to think through really carefully how we boil the story down to the fundamentals. And it's super interesting how many times going through that process of distilling the narrative down just highlights points that actually you wouldn't have really thought of otherwise. And sometimes, we go and ask some really dumb questions to the companies, and the companies think, well, actually, it kind of seems like a dumb question, but it's one we haven't thought of.
Do you have an example of something like that? That's super cool.
Yeah, I think one of my favorites is a very complicated, biologically oriented company developing a new drug. And it's a company called Maxient, Cambridge, really super company, super technology, super founding team. And their proposition, in their terms, it's very much focused on developing new biologics. So a type of drug, biologics, antibody-based drugs. And their biologics are specifically focused on targeting ion channels in cells. So they're small pores in cells. You think, how on earth do we describe this to an investment committee that probably most of them didn't do GCSE biology, or if they did, it was too long ago to kind of really remember. And it's so easy to fall into the trap on all these things of using the jargon, using the terms, and then not really even understanding yourself what those terms mean. So I boiled that one down to an analogy of saying, if you imagine, and I'm doing this live trying to recall, but if you imagine that as a human, we were the size of North America, one of our cells might be the size of the Empire State Building. And if you imagine that on the surface of the Empire State Building, you have a bunch of holes that are the size of a tennis ball. And there are maybe 50, I think, different shapes of holes. And those are like the ion channels in the cell. And so if you imagine from a drug perspective, you could use a small molecule drug approach where it's kind of like flying over New York City with a crop duster and just spraying everything and hoping some of it hits some of those holes in the Empire State Building. Or you could actually develop a really specialized drone that has on the end of its two arms of the antibody the shapes that fit precisely into those holes.
Yeah.
And they just go around and they look for those holes and they fill some of those holes. And that's effectively what Maxion is doing. And so you're just like going through it. It just forces a clarity of understanding in your own mind sometimes.
And do you use a lot of analogies to describe companies?
Yeah. Probably my colleague would say I use too many analogies.
And how was it with the Organox investment? I guess that's in some ways it's simpler because for context, it was a big liver transplant company preserving livers while they got transplanted. How was it getting I guess the investment committee on board for an investment like that?
It definitely is easier to tell that story. And sometimes, we meet a company and the company starts talking about what they're doing, and I'm sitting there thinking, how on earth am I going to explain this? Organox, there's a simple level of the story, which is exactly as you described. And you think, okay, this is actually a good narrative. But more abstractly, the really important thing for that one, for me, was that the company had a very clear grasp of the problem space that they were working in. And it's not always true, and often a lot of technology companies on the deep tech side are just really focused on their technology. The technology comes first, and then there's a sense of where you apply that technology. Organox is one of the companies where it really came about because the founder had a very strong sense of a problem. Problem in simplistic terms is a bunch of people die on the waiting list waiting for a transplant, and yet if you look on the other side of the equation, there are a bunch of organs that are discarded because of inefficiencies in managing that whole process. And then there are additional layers of that around buying more time. So actually, if you've got a perfect patient and a perfect organ, you're probably okay with the organ showing up in a nice chest and going straight in. If you've got a difficult patient with some other issues, or if you've got an organ and you're not sure if that organ works or not, on balance of probabilities, a surgeon would probably say, I'm not going to take the risk and transplant that. But if you can put it in the Organox machine and let the machine tell you whether the organ's functioning or not, it takes a lot of pressure off of the surgeon. So buys a lot of scope, I think, to expand both the uses of organs and the number of cases you can handle. And so all of those things really kind of played into being able to put together a very clear narrative and tell a very clear story. But then there's still a whole bunch of complexities, like how does this turn into a business? Who pays for it? How much are they going to pay? How many of these things are you going to do? How are you going to get it into market? And that's where, again, it's really interesting being in an organization like BGF because, we have people who have grappled with a lot of those business challenges in different forms. And specific one here was manufacturing. So I think a lot of investors look at something like Organox and think, yeah, it's pretty scary because they're actually making a thing and it has to be manufactured somewhere. And actually, when I look at the thing, it's a pretty complicated thing with a bunch of components from a bunch of different people. So you've got all this supply chain stuff. Just a lot of investors find that daunting and don't engage. I happen to have a colleague at BGF who is just a manufacturing expert. So I call him up, convince him to go spend some time with the company. He comes back and says, actually, gave them some advice on this, that, and the other, but more or less okay, and we can keep an eye on it. So
how large is the team at BGF so that you have all those experts?
Again, that's one of the really kind of great advantages for me because, we're kind of like a small fund with massive resources on the early stage side. And those massive resources are really us borrowing from the wider organization. So we're deploying 500 million a year. We've probably got 75 investors or so around the country. And then we've got a similarly sized back office function. So we have a team on the value creation side, people who help with recruitment, people who help with finding finance, people help with kind of plugging a gap in terms of a technology function within an organization. They got lots of interesting resources we can draw on that allow us to punch above our weight in terms of what we do on the early stage side.
It's really cool. One more question for those of our listeners who don't know. Can you explain, maybe as short as possible, what an evergreen fund is and how that works?
It's a really good point. So, for context, another, a normal fund would be a GP LP fund, where the GP is the investor who manages the fund. The LPs, the limited partners, are the pension funds and other sources of capital that allocate money to the GP, who then makes the investments. And that's usually tied up in a 10-year fund cycle. From a BGF perspective, we have shareholders instead of limited partners, and those shareholders put £2.5 billion of capital on our balance sheet effectively, and then we deploy that money. As we deploy the money into companies, when those companies sell, the money comes back into our pot. And we have been in a very fortunate position in the last few years of having more coming back in most years than we're deploying. And so we're in a self-sustaining position. And again, amazingly, from my perspective, is we can be in the market on my team on the early stage side every year deploying. We're never stopping to raise a fund because the money's there.
Yeah, and what kind of investors or shareholders invest in those funds typically versus the classic LP-GP structure?
So I think there's a big overlap between the two, but the GP-LP structure tends to first of all, be pretty well understood because it's been around for a while.
Yeah.
But also, it has a simple mechanism to it. So I commit some capital, you draw it down, invest it, and then when you sell things, you kind of pay me back. And at the end of the 10-year period, you've cleared it out, you've given me the chunk of money. I take the money that I gave you as base, all the historic costs. Then I take a hurdle rate, which is the amount I would have made if I just left that money in the bank. And then everything beyond that, I'm probably going to split it with you on a 80 pence to me and 20 pence to you basis, which is your carried interest or your performance bonus as a fund manager.
Yes.
If you look at the evergreen structure, it's a little bit less clear how the investors get their money back. And so you have to be thoughtful about that mechanism. One mechanism is, well, you're a shareholder effectively, and we're building value here, and so we can find another shareholder to buy your shares at some stage for a higher price. What tends to happen from a BGF perspective is we look at the balance between what we've deployed in a year and what we've brought back in, and we pay dividends to our shareholders. A lot of the advantage we have is a function of the quality and the approach of our shareholders, who are very patient. And for them, I think what we've done is kind of a part of their mission, and it happens to then be a part of their mission that they now benefit from financially.
Yeah, and I mean, if you assume the returns are just as good, then there should be ways to have so much capital left that you can pay those dividends, even if it's not so clearly defined at what moment that happens. Yeah. And the nice thing that Evergreen removes is sort of this incentive problem of, oh, did I invest in the right fund, or am I in the wrong fund that just happened to not perform as well?
Yeah, exactly. And there are cases now where I think this model is being more widely used. So OFE and Oxford have used a similar approach to us. And I think Northern Gritstone have likewise put in place a similar approach with a different shareholder base. No, pleasure. Yeah, anytime. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Funds becoming increasingly large and consolidated into a small pool of super large VCs. But yeah, interesting. But thank you so much for joining us, Tim.
No problem, my pleasure. Let me know when I can hang out.
Yep.
Yeah. I think our producer will just kick you out when we've got everything that we need. And next up, we have got Dom Hallis, who is one of the executive directors of Startup Coalition. He is like a huge advocate, primarily in the UK, but also across Europe, for advocating for tech, making public policy better for tech and startups, making it easy to found, scale startups, being a really great lobbyist and voice for tech within governments. So I think it'd be really interesting to hear from him and his take. There's been a lot of news in the UK government. We've seen a huge amount of investment coming in from some of the world's top startups and tech companies, but we've also seen the H1B
Who maybe has ideas how.
And he is the guy. He published like a long paper on it last week.
Amazing. Cool.
And that's why I texted him actually. I was like, this is perfect timing to get you on.
Do we have him already?
And he is here. Hello, Dom. How are you doing?
Hi, Dom.
Hi, good, thank you. How are you guys?
Very good. You hearing us okay? Is everything good?
Yeah, I can hear you. All good.
Amazing. It's great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It is our absolute pleasure. So to kick off, can you just give like a quick introduction into who you are and the Startup Coalition more broadly?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Dom Hallis. I've run the Startup Coalition for 8 years now, and the Startup Coalition's a lobby group here in the UK, spending all of our time trying to fix startup policy for the ecosystem. So right from super early, companies being built with one man and his dog or whatever, right up to the folks that are listing and the big names that you guys have on an awful lot of the time. And what does that mean in practice? It means talking to politicians and policymakers as well as the ecosystem folks on three main kind of buckets of things. One is talent, so immigration skills, getting people into companies basically. Second is capital, so how do we make sure that these guys have the investment they need to build amazing businesses? And then the third is the kind of regulatory environment, so either making sure the policy doesn't balls it all up, or frankly, sometimes it locks it as well.
That's really, really cool. I think like the big one that has been talked about a lot over the last days is immigration, right? With Trump's order to add this kind of massive fee on H-1B visas. What are your thoughts here, and how can Europe/the UK make the best and the most of this kind of shift in the US?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge opportunity, right? One of the weird things about policy is that actually, it's like the old joke of like, how are you going to outrun the bear? I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun you. And the truth is actually there's a big opportunity for the UK and for the wider European ecosystems in having functional immigration policy that makes sense on a day-to-day basis in a world where things, is like, is it $100,000 a year? Maybe. Oh no, actually, no, it's $100,000 one fee. Oh no, he definitely didn't say that, even though he said it next to the president in the Oval Office. Like, it's complete chaos, right? And I think that, one of the weird things about immigration policy in particular is that, for the most part, if you look at the detail of immigration policy for the kind of companies that we work with and the folks that you have on the program, like, the truth is, it's pretty generous in most of Europe, like in the UK in particular. Like, if you want to hire an amazing, programmer, like, you can do that. For the most part, software engineering is a highly skilled profession, and most countries are delighted to have those people. The challenge has actually been in sort of two things. One is making sure the bureaucracy of the system, so the faff of getting a visa out of the British Home Office, for example, which is a complete nightmare, functions effectively and isn't a massive barrier. And the second is making sure that people know there's an opportunity there with great companies building amazing things, which is really what they care about the most. And I think that, on the former, that's kind of our job to fix, and we have to go in and plug away at the British government and, other folks in their national government to try and improve that. But the latter, actually, in many ways, this is why the opportunity is now, is because it's for the first time in a long time, you have a lot of amazing talent that's looking at where they are today, whether they're in US companies or based in the US for other companies, and saying, maybe this isn't the place for me, and maybe I've got an opportunity somewhere else. So hopefully that opens eyes to these new opportunities and the amazing companies that are being built here.
Yeah. And so, but what should we do, or the UK do, to advertise that as much as possible? Or what do you think will push people in that direction in a moment like this?
Yeah, so I think it's two things, right? The first is it's kind of very directly signaling that we care and we want people here, right? And so actually you had the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, was opening the new Revolut HQ in Canary Wharf yesterday. And I think sort of made a really clear point that, like, whilst the US is shutting down these visa routes, we want to open them up more. And I think that's like a really good sort of signal. It's not like a change in policy or anything. It's like very literally the top politicians in the country saying, we actually want great people here. So that's the first thing.
So it's like a marketing PR thing.
Yeah, like, we're sort of banging our own drum, and especially in Britain, like, we're pretty crap at that, right? Let's be honest. Like, we're very good at saying how terrible things are, but actually it's pretty decent here, and we should be telling that's one.
Very humble.
And then the other side of it is just the ability to kind of, how do we then make it as easy as possible in policy terms and do the things that we think are important. So we sent a letter to the Home Secretary, Siobhan Mahmood, in the UK yesterday with a few recommendations, mostly sort of doing two things. One is kind of cleaning up the bureaucracy in the system for these people who are now likely to move, and, kind of making short-term moves that signal that we definitely want them here, whether that's kind of, limiting the bureaucracy, it's providing specific support for the kind of people who apply now, maybe even reducing the fees for a short period of time. So there's some stuff on that. And then there's, how do you make it more attractive in the long run to come and work as an amazing tech talent here in the UK? And so on that side, it was, what can we do on stock option reform to make the offers that companies will be making more generous than they would have been, because we're able to make tweaks to the tax system in the UK. And I'm sure that the European countries will very reasonably looking at the same thing, and that's where the opportunity lies, right?
Super cool. And do you think, like you just said, like, there's a third bucket, like, make it as attractive in the long run? What are the gaps on the employee stock options, incentives, and so on?
Yeah, so I mean, there's obviously there's two things. First of all, it's a smorgasbord across the continent, and so it depends on exactly how it works in different places, and some are better than others. I mean, in the UK specifically, that we have a thing called EMI, and the Enterprise Management Incentive, which is a really great scheme for early stage employees to be heavily incentivized to go and work in innovative companies, because it basically gives you tax benefits if you're an earlier stage employee. But that hasn't been updated for a long time. So, like, when it was first set out, companies were scaling much more slowly, so there's limits on the time frame that it can work towards. But also, frankly, the amount of money that was needed to build an amazing company was more limited. And so we're trying to get the limits of that pushed up at the budget this year in November, so probably in almost exactly 2 months' time. And we're hopeful. We've had some really productive conversations with the British government about sort of pushing up the ceilings on that to reflect probably what it takes now to be building a company, because what we don't want is companies are busting through the asset limits or the employee limits of those very rapidly now in a way they weren't in the past, meaning that actually, employee number, 35 won't get the kind of generous options that we would want, when actually we want to make it as generous as possible for as many as possible to be able to attract this great talent.
Yeah, and like when you use a ceiling of any sort, especially on the employee count, then there's like an incentive, okay, let's like stay under this number, even though it's not what's the best thing for the business. And that's, again, not what the UK wants here, right? They want rapidly growing companies that can grow and that can push GDP and so on.
Totally. And I mean, and like I said, so the employee limit at the moment on the scheme is a problem, but actually the bigger problem is so what they call the asset cap, but it's basically how much money the company has raised. So at the moment that's set at kind of 30 million. And now, like back in the day, like 30 million might have been a reasonable point at which you're like, okay, this company's really grown and scaled and it's doing something significant. But now, like, the truth is, if you're going to compete in, deep tech, like, you're raising over that
Sorry, Dom,
you have, like,
we've lost your sound.
Oh, can you hear me? Am I there? A minute.
I think that's back.
Is that better? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, you were just saying that 30 million was a reasonable amount back in the day.
It was a reasonable amount back in the day, but yeah, it's, nowadays you're completely in a different ballpark. And the reality is, like, how do we make sure that, we're effectively competing and making sure that, the people who are having to build and compete globally with, especially American companies that are raising megatons of capital in deep tech, it's like they're going to bust straight through that. So let's make sure that they don't have to.
And you sounded optimistic that there's going to be some changes in the next budget. Can I ask, how receptive has this current government been to, I don't know, your policy suggestions and the wider tech community?
Yeah, I think so. I always start from the point of view that one of the weird things about kind of tech startups, and especially working on policy for tech startups, is no politician comes into office and says, you know who I'm really going to screw? It's like those guys working really hard to build amazing tech startups and scale-ups, right? As in, like, that is not the incentive and the starting point for any of these people. And so we have we've had really constructive conversations with the British government. And if you look at over the past 15 years, quite frankly, we were set up in 2010 as an organization. And the kind of micro interventions for the tech community in all of that time, the policy that is specifically focused on sort of the startups, the scale-ups, has actually been pretty good. And that same has been true in the past year if you look at the budget. The challenge is that there's then almost the thing that's considered kind of startup policy in a bucket, and then there's like macroeconomic policy that's like a completely different question, and that obviously impacts and crosses over the same thing, but you can get screwed in that side of it, right? So like I think the budget last year in the UK is a really good example where there was some really good stuff in it for the startup community, like significantly more R&D funding, a lot of things that we really like. The problem is if capital gains is going to go up loads because the government needs to find money because they're in a difficult position from a fiscal perspective, then founders are getting screwed, right? Let's be frank. And so I think it's that ability to understand and hopefully kind of tie together for policymakers this idea that you can't distinguish between the two, right? As in, it's great that you've got these little pockets of money over here for entrepreneurs, but the truth is, if the tax environment doesn't work, if you decide immigration policy needs to be too harsh for some political reason, like this isn't going to work. It has to be a holistic approach, and I think it's going to be a difficult fiscal environment for the government in the UK in 2 months' time for the budget. Everyone knows that. I think it's pretty much on the front page of the papers every day right now. But we're hopeful based on the conversations that we've had. And like I was funnily enough, I saw the Chancellor last week, and like she does understand what founders need and cares about it deeply. And so, fingers crossed. Like it's always a difficult ride, but we'll see what we get.
Yeah, but it's like you can't just say, I don't want to screw the entrepreneurs. I'm neutral, but I need to like prioritize them because they're the ones who in 5 to 10 years are going to carry a lot of the economy. And so it's like it's not about being malicious, but it's about
being actively
pushing them.
Helpful and beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally right. And like, again, I think I always come back to this idea of one of the things that's changed the most in my time in working in kind of tech policy is you're seeing more and more people in governments, not just in the UK, but elsewhere, that actually have a much deeper understanding both of the ecosystem and therefore of exactly that, right? Which is like, you look at Matt Clifford, who did a lot of work as the AI advisor to the Prime Minister over the past year. Right now, the Chancellor has an entrepreneurship advisor, Alex DePledge, who's a sort of multiple-time founder and used to sit on our board. So you're starting to see people who have a much deeper understanding of this. The new AI minister in the UK, a guy called Kanishka Narayan, was a VC by background, and you're getting a lot more of that kind of that inflow of tech talent to politics, whether because they've sort of done stuff before and they're getting into it a bit more. And obviously, if people understand this stuff a bit better, like by definition, they A, care about it more, but B, hopefully have a deeper sense of why it matters. I think it's always, I'm always fundamentally sympathetic to politicians, partially because I spend so much time talking to them. And partially because I don't think any of us on this call would want to spend our time doing what they're doing, quite frankly. And so we kind of have to be honest about these are genuinely difficult trade-offs to make. But as you say, from our perspective, it's not a question of or either or can you just make it work? It's frankly, if you're not going to have the economy that we need in 10 years if these companies aren't able to succeed. So how do we make sure we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure they are?
Yeah. Are you seeing a lot of data and do you do any research or analysis around are we already
built in Europe and sales and go-to-market being built in the United States. And I think this is really interesting, and I think it poses a lot of interesting questions, not just for the ecosystem, but for policymakers. So, you have this situation where actually potentially a lot of the high-value jobs and a sort of value accrual can still exist in Europe, but ultimately people will naturally want to go and sell into the biggest market possible. That's what it is to build a global business, right? And the challenge, I think, I think that's fundamentally a good thing, and we're seeing that happen more and more. The risk, I think, from a kind of European perspective and a UK perspective in particular, is the sort of that increasingly you're seeing people move earlier and earlier. And I think that actually, if we're able, the sort of success metric would be that people are building that product and tech in the UK and in Europe as a whole, and hopefully expanding across European markets, but then also expanding globally. And that, that for us is a win. The challenge is that increasingly, if you think about the kind of exit stage of a business, European, stock exchanges aren't particularly competitive, as people consistently discuss endlessly. And actually, what does it mean to retain value in European markets in the long run in a world where we don't have competitive stock exchanges, where you're not likely to list here? And we have to think a little bit more deeply about what the kind of best way for entrepreneurs to give back is. And so I think that that's in many ways a new question. It's not something that we've had posed before. And so we start, as kind of the UK that's had a very successful stock exchange for a very long time, needs to think about it for the first time, and politicians and others are starting to grapple with that. But I think that actually the sort of future looks still very bright. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on a key point there with the IPO market, because you want the capital that is generated from these companies to then also flow back into the local ecosystem. And one big issue is kind of that there's not enough liquidity in the European system because they're all so siloed. But then capital markets are a thing of national pride. So nobody wants to give theirs up and all do it in Brussels or all do it in London.
Exactly.
Do you have thoughts on how to grapple with that issue?
Yeah, so I think I kind of see it as it's actually a bigger challenge even than that, where what we have in the UK, at least, one of the big issues that we've been working on for a long time is pension fund reform to try and unlock some of the institutional capital for venture. And I know, again, this is a Europe-wide problem, but it's a UK problem in particular. And I see these two things are linked, right? Fundamentally,
definitely also a German problem, by the way.
But what's fascinating to me is it's the same underlying problem that then when we talk about public exchanges, it's the same challenge, right? What we have is a small c conservative financial institutions that are unwilling or unable to understand the kind of businesses that we're talking about here, and it flows then throughout that journey. and in my mind, I think that actually, if we're able to encourage, a much deeper understanding and frankly deeper investment into, the venture landscape in general at earlier stage through the LP structures, like what you'll probably see is a deeper understanding further up the market as well, because frankly, then institutional investors will be incentivized to have a much deeper understanding further up the stack. And I think there's there's a kind of natural part of that there. The one thing I would also say, and this is almost to your point about the kind of self-interest nation by nation on some of the kind of listings questions, is one of the things that really could potentially change this is AI, where actually, paradoxically, one of the reasons why national governments care so deeply about their national exchange is because it's not simply the sort of prestige of having an exchange, although that definitely matters, and everyone knows that. But if you look at, for example, the London Stock Exchange Group, I think about 8% of their business is the exchange. The reality is it's a data business with a stock exchange attached, right? And so we kind of have to be realistic about what that really means today. But what does matter to national governments is all the stuff that then sits around the financial services infrastructure that provides the exchange. So it's, what do the banking structures look like? What do legal structures look like? And now, as a services-based economy in the UK, I was giving a talk at a sort of big name law firm a couple of months ago, and I said they were asking about this, and I said, you guys can't see the wood for the trees. The main problem for your business is AI. It's not going to be the decline of the London Stock Exchange, right? And I think the reality is there is going to be a natural shift because of that, regardless of whether or not these guys are ready, that I think then will hopefully make policymakers think a little bit differently about that kind of national vision, precisely because this is going to change anyway. So how do we make it change for the better as opposed to for the worse? Yeah,
that would be the dream.
Yeah.
If the lawmakers understand the threat of AI.
Yeah. Well, that's that, and this is the thing. What's interesting to me is, and I say this is, like I said, I go and speak to politicians every single day, and the truth is, I think there's a much deeper understanding that, I say, politicians are in a similar place to the public. Whereas if you ask them, they will understand that this is going to be a major thing, and they understand that they should be ready, but they're not yet, necessarily all of them at least, in the place where they're able kind of mentally to cope with the concept that they're going to have to do something about it, right? Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
They're still in what I would characterize as the ostrich phase, right?
Yeah. At least
get them out of that, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, at least in mainland Europe, there's still a narrative of but on the infrastructure side of things, on the model side, we can't catch up anymore. And if that's if that's even in the industry, the thought process, how should you have policy catch up with, no, we will be cutting edge too, and we will take this seriously?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, so I've always treated my job as much about, obviously we've got to articulate on behalf of the ecosystem, but it's to help translate between those two worlds, because I think policymakers have a certain set of levers available to them at the end of the day. They're not magicians. We have to be clear. They can't make an economy go up or down. That's not how these things work. And I think one of the challenges sometimes is that actually helping them understand that, when we talk about succeeding in AI, it's not one big lever that says AI that they just pull, right? Actually, it's this is a really sort of deep and granular market, and success in AI for, a medium-sized European country is not the same as what success looks like for the United States, right? So if you look at the way the US is thinking about this at the moment, which is we want to have at least a stake in every single part of the stack, right, from bare metal right up to the app layer, right, and that's not going to be success for any European nation. What success will look like is understanding where it's possible to succeed in the different parts of the stack and supporting companies to do that, and so creating an environment that does so. But it requires almost people to accept what they can do and what they can't do, and not, to your point about national pride, some of this stuff is deciding something's better just because we have a British flag on it isn't the point, right? As in, actually, it's how do we make sure that we understand what we're really trying to achieve here? And then in a world where you're seeing, for example, in AI policy, much more interventionist approaches to public policy than you've seen in the past, and the American government investing in Intel for strategic reasons and all this sort of stuff. What does it look like to be strategic about the role government can play in some of that? But politicians need to be educated in what the opportunities are and what the risks are before we kind of get there. And I'm not sure we've done a great job of that, to be fair. I think we probably need to do a better job.
Yeah, that's interesting. So there's a big piece about education before we kind of make our list of demands almost. But we're kind of we're out of time. I wanted to ask one final question. We had Andreas Klinger from EU Incon last week. One of the questions that, they're doing a lot of great work on building that sort of pan-European entity. One of the questions that we asked him was like, what is number one on your list that you would like the government to implement? So I guess from your perspective, either in the budget or across policy more broadly, if you could pick one thing that the UK government would do or implement tomorrow, what would it be?
Yes, so the biggest thing is more capital in the market, right? And I mean, pension funds is the obvious place to start with this, like in the UK context. So it's how do we make sure that we're actually delivering on the voluntary commitments that a bunch of pension funds have made in the UK through the Mansion House Compact. And I think that if we're talking about a scale of difference between capital deployment here and in the US, that is, massive. Even per capita massive. And so I think in reality, if we're able to move the needle on that, I think you increase the ambition level of companies hugely. I think you give people a genuine opportunity to succeed in competing globally, and crucially, you make sure that it's not just American pension funds that benefit from the success of European companies. It's my mum, right, and her pension fund, and frankly, like in the long run, not just for the success of the ecosystem, but for the kind of political buy-in and the concept that European politicians should bluntly give a shit about our companies, like the ability to have like the wider society succeed from the uplift that our companies will build is going to be absolutely critical. So that's, I think, the single thing that would be the most impactful.
Amazing. Let's get it done. More capital into the market.
Thank you for working on this and pushing these things forward.
Yeah.
Important.
No, it's amazing. It's great
with
work.
such empathy for the lawmakers, because I think the tech side can sometimes be like very pessimistic towards the government, and I think it's really great that you're sitting between the two. And
yeah, especially in the UK, it's like non-stop. Especially, I spend a lot of my time on LinkedIn, but it's non-stop
bashing
the UK government, and it doesn't matter what side you're on, what side the government's on. It's just like always they're doing a terrible job. So it's not an easy job you've got, I can imagine. But Dom, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dom.
Oh, thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it. Cheers, guys.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
And we are about to pause the live stream for a few minutes as our next guest is going to be here in person.
Yes, we're going to go pick him up for the first time.
Stay tuned. We'll be back in a few minutes. And we are back.
Yes, with our next guest, Jan Philipp, or JP, from Conduct AI. Fun fact, JP and I actually did our undergrad together, so we go way back, and somehow both found our way into the tech ecosystem. And so they had a really exciting announcement this week, and we had to have him on for that reason. JP, can you introduce yourself for those who haven't seen you all over Seb's or your LinkedIn, and tell us a little bit about. It's impossible because it's so viral. And tell us a little bit about what Conduct does and about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paula. Thanks, Seb. Great to be on here, especially in the London neighborhood. All about the ecosystem here. I'm JP, one of 3 co-founders of Conduct. As Paula said, back in the day, we went to undergrad together doing business, which is what everyone in Germany seems to do. But then we managed to escape from that via an undergrad, a second one in philosophy, politics, and economics. I did at Oxford. And then I joined Palantir here in the London office, was part of the kind of early commercial team here in Europe, and was part of large digital transformation projects with the likes of Airbus, BMW, etc. And we can go into detail if you're interested, but what it always involved is a lot of enterprise complexity, old systems, old processes that needed some kind of re-engineering, and Palantir's platforms came in to build kind of new software on top or instead of it. But then our main insight from speaking to lots of CIOs at the time was, these old systems like your SAPs, etc., these actually contain so much critical And I think the main push where we said, look, we now have to just do this, was working with a defense company in Germany who was trying to increase their output of tanks going to Ukraine. So you could argue that's a very important company mission. But these guys were actually held back by not being able to just change their processes in their ERP quickly enough. They literally gave us an estimate of this is going to take 4 years plus to make any change to this. And so then let's have another conversation. And at that point, we were like, look, this is just completely broken. The whole system is basically not working the way it's meant to be.
And how are you solving it?
Yeah, great question. So we thought that same questions to ourselves. We then went in and tried to kind of untangle what even is the problem in that whole space. And ultimately, it all comes down to a lack of transparency into these systems, both from a technical perspective as well as from a business process kind of semantic perspective. So what we mean by that is many of our customers at the time didn't really know, which data sets are even used for one particular production scheduling workflow, or by which logic do you call this raw material versus that. And so all of that sits somewhere in the system, but you don't really know where.
It's hard-coded in there somewhere.
It's hard-coded.
And you have no idea how it's actually
By someone 20
working.
years
Years ago, probably.
Literally,
Yeah.
and that's not documented because nothing's ever documented
Yeah.
and always out of date. And so there's just that sheer complexity and size to it, the millions of lines of code. And so solving that required creating that transparency, and then at the same time also putting a layer on top that makes it more intuitive for people to interact with it. So basically the business process side of it. So you don't want to talk to your code base to be like, which tables are used for this and which function does what. Like, some people care about that, but ultimately that's not what you want to do. What you want to do is you want to ask, Perplexity and ChatGPT style questions around
Why
my
is
production
this-
process is broken. Let's fix it. How can I do that? And
Yeah.
that's what we enable.
So awesome. So it's like ERP explainability, and then actually also fixing those old and
Yes.
black box issues.
So we call it enterprise system intelligence, right? Or concretely, it's an AI companion for all of your teams working on SAP and maintaining these systems. And
Which are IT systems, IT teams mainly, or
yeah, great question. So the main buyer and user is the IT org, and I would say for the first time we're really venturing towards a tool that can be a baseline for business users as well as IT, because you now get to speak the language that everyone understands in the company, right? So we're also creating that single source of truth for everyone that that allows business users to also ask a question that in the past they would have been blocked on a long IT ticket queue for. So it's really starting in IT, but then venturing out from
making it broader. What I really love about your approach is that you're not saying, okay, ERP is in like this old landscape and the black box is broken. Let's fix it by ripping out the ERP and building another new one. You're just saying, okay, this is how it is. We have to work with it. How do we like augment the way that you do work with SAP rather than just ripping it out, which is, as we also know, a very long and painful process in itself.
And I mean, you worked in VC, right? So that was the main pushback that everyone came to us with in the beginning. They were like, but why would you guys try to make something that's pretty broken a bit less broken instead of just building something new? But I think our contrarian insight here was these systems are so embedded, there's no way they're going to be exchanged in the next 20, 30 years plus, right? And so you need to do something about just making things better today.
Yeah,
and then it would put you in the best position to ever build something anyway, right? If you are the closest to the systems and the pain points, how are you finding it talking to potential customers or pilots? You know, this is, my first job as a consultant, and consultants can spend years implementing these systems and working with stakeholders, and it can be so painful. How are you finding it talking to people inside these businesses about this problem?
Yeah, I think it's actually this feeling of empowerment and liberation, honestly. I think it's the first time that these teams get a solution that can meet them where they are, and that understands their pain, and that is not just a let me put another SI project on top of that and basically rip your knowledge out of your organization. We're basically bringing that back into the organization.
Amazing.
And tell us about your round. You just raised a very sizable 12 million seed round.
That's right.
How did that go down?
Yeah, we were very lucky to get a lot of interest. We had, 6 or 7 term sheets, and then ultimately ended up going for Creandum as the lead investor.
Awesome.
We like them a lot. They know the space super well. They're great partners.
Who is it, Peter, by the way?
It's Peter being our board member and main investor. And then we also work with Lucid Capital. They were actually part from the very beginning on iterating, rating.
What's important to you in an investor?
I think it's mostly the fact that you really know that these people are not they're going to have your backs and they're not going to screw you over. I think that's actually an undervalued in many ways trait, which everyone's talking about who has the best platform team and the best connections to companies, but all of that is great, and we're grateful for the stuff that these funds are doing for us there as well. But I think ultimately you just want loyal capital that's going to support you in good and bad times. And accelerate you even more, right? And push you where you're maybe not as fast yet.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I've heard that a lot about Creandum specifically, that they are like really good partners and they're kind of with you for the long haul. So it makes total sense.
Yeah. When I heard you raised with them, I'm such a Creandum fan, so I think it's really, really awesome.
Yeah, we're very grateful to have them as partners, and we did a lot of referencing on them. It was not a decision that we took lightly. I think they were like, as you spoke to more founders to back reference us than even ever before. We were like, it's an important decision for us. Speak of one-way doors, right?
Yeah.
You can't get that back.
True.
Can't get that equity back. Yeah.
And it's great. It's a great networking exercise. You talk to more founders.
And the more you're like, we're not really decided yet, the more high-profile founders they say.
I think I need one more intro to a unicorn founder, please. You're saying that legacy enterprise software is holding back GDP in a way. And I think the tank example was a really good one. If that takes 4 years and it's a massive need right now, that's a huge problem. What world, can you paint a picture for us what kind of world it would be where this works and where this kind of gets jailbroken?
Let's talk about 2 different things. Number one, what does that world look like and how do we empower it?
Yep.
So the world where processes can just be changed much more quickly is just one of enterprise agility and more dynamism, right? You get your tanks more quickly, but you also get all of your business processes more quickly. And concretely, then it's not about cost savings anymore. It's not about saving that consulting project or implementing one change faster. It's about doing revenue generating activities faster. One of our customers they deliver kind of time sensitive products to their network of customers across the US, and one module in SAP has been custom built to optimize the route and who gets pinged at what point in time. And so being able to change these things and optimize them more quickly means more revenue in a given time unit. And that's what these companies ultimately need, right? Despite the complexity, they need faster agility to adjust to an ever-evolving landscape. That's what we empower. And the way we do that is by giving that transparency across the whole enterprise stack. SAP is the starting point, but the more you get, enterprise applications built everywhere, the more you have AI and AI agents running around your enterprise doing many different business processes, you need one place that has end-to-end visibility into which system does what part of my business process, what do I need to change if I need to make adjustments, and having that layer as one source of truth, that's what Conduct is going to empower in the future.
And how are you thinking about, at the moment you're going deep into SAP, how are you thinking about going broad at some point, and who would be the next platform to kind of help fix?
Yeah. Look, SAP, and just doing this for SAP probably makes you, not only probably makes you $1 billion company, right? But that's not what we're doing it for. We're doing it for generating that GDP level impact and economic boost. And so the next ones are always going to be the ones that are just most critical for our customers. Like that's what drove us to SAP, and that's what's going to drive us to the next ones. We're already getting customers asking us about, can you do that for our MES system and for Salesforce? And there's no reason why you can't do that for all of them. It's not an or question, right? It's definitely an and, while not losing focus on delivering well on SAP.
Got it.
What have you learned in this first year of building Conduct about enterprise sales? Because you're not just working on enterprise software, you're also building enterprise software for them yourself.
I think enterprise sales is at the same time very hard and very easy. So to start with, I think one problem or one error that many startups make, and where YC Wisdom has completely misguided many of them, is that you shouldn't always start mid-cap or SME. I just don't. Ruling out from the get-go working with enterprise, that doesn't make any sense to me. And I would even argue that venture funding is exactly for that. You're able to not generate revenue for years because of funding. And so you should be going for the problems that actually make sense for your product and where you are differentiated as a team. So that to start with.
Yeah, and sort of like, just because it's hard, like they're bigger, doesn't actually mean that serving them is that much harder, but it's just different.
Look, in some ways it is, right? But your product is also going to be different. So if you're not engaging with them, you're not going to learn, right?
Yeah.
And so you're never going to build a good enterprise product if you're just doing SME. Why is it harder? Well, all of your decision processes take longer. You've got much more paperwork. You've got more people to align. You've got procurement. Like even after getting the green light from a commercial perspective, that can take you months, right?
Yeah.
But you just have to treat that as a funnel. It just takes time, and you just do several other things at the same or in parallel. But then you're also in, and that almost creates its own mode, right? And we actually started seeing every procurement process and every order form that we have to work through. We saw that as, every other company that wants to work with them and every competitor has to go
get
through
through
the
that
same.
too,
So
yeah.
we might as well just start it earlier than them, and that creates defensibility for us.
Yeah, and maybe those processes are also learnings for your software. Because that's a process and a system in itself that happens every single day at large companies.
That happened the other day, actually. We logged into a platform that we had been analyzing. I was like, now I get where they need us.
This is terrible.
And what about the $12 million? How are you thinking about spending that?
Yeah, so we're spending them in a way where we always tackle the biggest bottleneck. That sounds like a vague answer, but I think it really matters. Like we had that money, for some time now before announcing, and it didn't really change what we do operationally. But we just don't see any financial constraint anymore in where we want to invest. But our investments have always been aggressive and will continue to be aggressive. Now we see what we could consider a product market fit. We are building a go-to-market team, and we're going to invest without any constraints there. But we didn't. What I'm saying is, the fact that now we have that money doesn't change whether we consider this a good investment. We consider this a good investment because now is the right time from a product maturity standpoint.
Yeah. How big is the team now?
We're 17 people now.
And you have 2 co-founders.
So I've got 2, so we're a team
So
of
you're
3
3?
overall. Yeah.
Where did you all meet again, or how did you?
We all work at
come
Palantir together.
Okay, Palantir Mafia. Love it. And what are you hiring for right now? Like, what is top of mind in terms of building the right team?
So we're always hiring on the engineering front and exceptional talent. We're super lucky to have a great team around us there already, but we're always expanding there. But the most urgent focus right now is on building that go-to-market org, which is going to consist of account executives as well as we call deployment strategists like Palantir, which means doing customer enablement and making sure that we extract all the learnings from our engagements with customers and feed them back into product.
Great. So hopefully someone who's watching is a stellar AE or a deployment strategist for Conduct.
That'd be fantastic. What's your commission, guys?
And how are you thinking about expansion, global footprint? Are you thinking, you're obviously here in London, are you thinking about building teams out in Europe and US? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we've had a focus on Europe for now just because of our own network and time zones and kind of pragmatic reasons. We're now starting to also talk to US companies. There's no reason why our product shouldn't work just as well there. And so we do want to be as aggressive kind of on both sides at the same time. We're building the initial go-to-market org here in Europe, but then we'll be very fast moving over to the US as well.
And would one of your co-founders ever think about moving over there?
For sure.
Yeah.
I can
Exciting.
provide a landing pad in New York.
Yeah.
That's the right location.
Such a useful podcast.
So much value add. Oh.
Oh my God. What is your 10-year vision for the company? What do you want it to be?
We don't want it to be a great exit to one of the incumbents. We think that enterprise system intelligence and the fact that you need a layer that coordinates the logic across all of your enterprise systems, that is its own category, and we want to own and win that. The ultimate vision here is for us to really be that one person enterprise IT team, not because of replacing the people there. The key point here is that we provide all the tools that decision makers in IT can do their work better and can provide the software that the business needs at the right time and pace and the right quality, right? And that is empowered by us operating the logic and the process across your whole enterprise estate, and that's the role that we want to play.
Amazing.
Love it.
Very cool. Can you share any mistakes or regrets that you've made so far in your journey that you kind of think, oh God, like we got that wrong, or I made that mistake there, and something that's kind of like that you've learned from and that now you're applying?
I think I make mistakes every day.
Yeah.
Honestly, I've got a long list where I write down learnings every day, and it's growing, which is great. That's honestly the thing that I'm enjoying the most, and you just need to make sure that you're growing faster than your
Yeah.
mistakes. So one thing to highlight is, especially as a first time founder, I think pace is just the thing that always matters. You always want to bias for just get it done in just 80%, and most things are actually two-way doors, and you can correct most of these things, and moving much more quickly on these is I think the main takeaway from the first few months.
Yeah.
And there are other things that you've specifically learned from your time at Palantir, not just about the problem itself, but whether that's like cultural or execution. Are there things that you learned there that you're now applying?
Yeah. Palantir was really good at being obsessed with customer value and listening to the customer. That's the big upside of the forward deployed model. And so we're taking the good things out of that, but applying them to a more focused and targeted product, right?
Yeah.
We're not doing that kind of solutions consulting that Palantir did. Apart from that, there was a lot of good things around how they identified talent, how they believed in empowering people and providing ownership to everyone, which is definitely something that we're very, very keen on as well at Conrad.
Amazing. Well, I think we're out of time.
Love it. Yeah.
But JP,
thank you so much, JP.
Like, we're going to be
for coming
watching
by.
with a lot of excitement. We love what you're building, and thank you so much for coming down to the studio and joining us in person.
Yeah.
Thank you for the support. Appreciate it.
Amazing.
Right, we're going to pause. We're going to be back in 5 minutes when we've got Heather from Lassie joining us. So thank you very much. See you soon. And we are back, with a very exciting guest. This is Hedda from Lassie. Why don't you give us a quick intro into who you are and what you've built?
Hi everyone, my name is Hedda Borrud Olson. I'm the CEO and founder of Lassie. We're a super app for pets, for cats and dogs. Today, monetizing with insurance. We just had 70 million in ARR, but in the future, we're building for solving everything for pet health. Right now, I'm based in Stockholm, and we're live in Sweden, Germany, and France. And I got the inspiration to build Lassie from my mom, who's a veterinary. So I realized I had this unique advantage that my mom could always tell me how to take care of your pets. And that's kind of what we're trying to democratize and digitalize now with Lassie.
Wow, amazing. That's such impressive revenue numbers. I mean, we all kind of know that the pet space is a hot one, but really, really impressive what you've built there concretely.
And also lean, like very lean, because part of the announcement was 1 million ARR per employee, and now this is like the super hot metric at the moment, ARR per employee. And I've had and it's like to hit the million is a fantastic achievement. Can you talk a bit about how you've been able to not just grow quickly and hit the big milestones, but also do it in a way where you've managed to stay lean?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we always been bragging about this, revenue per FTE number. And I think 2, 3, 4 years ago, no one cared as much, but now it feels like it's very hot. But it's been a fun journey. We've always been a team that's like, oh, this is time consuming, or this is admin heavy. Let's see what we can do to optimize it. So we've been super early on the whole kind of AI claims optimizations, working with LLM, from everything from customer success to claims to pricing. But I think our biggest kind of proof point is really where we automated 55% of all claims, where money back to the customers in 6 minutes. And that's just such a win-win for us. I mean, we're saving lots of money and time in doing that. And also our claims handlers can focus on the more kind of interesting and challenging cases instead of the more simpler admin heavy cases. But also it's such a win for the customers. I mean, it can be quite large bills. You don't want to wait several weeks to get your money back. A vet bill can be easily 10K or even more. So definitely something we will continue to focus more on. And there's so much exciting opportunities right now. And I think sometimes people forget that you can definitely launch new business models with LLMs and with AI, but you can also do your kind of existing business model a lot stronger and better with, just building internal AI agents for yourself.
Like, not everyone has to build AI. You can also just be the best user of AI ever.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we do build it in-house for our use case, but you don't need to be B2B SaaS to build with AI right now. It's very accessible for everyone.
Can I ask, like, what you were just kind of alluding to, there's so many exciting things you could be building. What's like the most exciting thing to you? Where you're like, I need to like get my capacity on that topic?
I mean, right now, I think we're focusing on 2 things. I mean, for me, we're live in 3 markets now, Sweden, Germany, France, kind of itching a bit to my expansion fingers to launch a new market. So that's definitely something that would be keen to explore in the future, but also adding more kind of things in the pet care health ecosystem. And we're actually right now in the interesting phase where we're sitting down and looking at the different opportunities. There's so much kind of into pet food, and then there's the whole kind of service arena. So we're still kind of looking at it right now. We have kind of a crazy DAU per MAU in our app. So now we're looking to kind of make the app even stronger and start monetizing it.
And can you talk a bit more about the app? Because the app is like a very central piece, but of course you monetize by insurance, and insurance typically has very low engagement. People normally buy it once and then they forget about it. But you've managed to build an app that people keep coming back to. So what's in the app that the people are finding so engaging?
Yeah, so it's a mix of, we really try to personalize your pet health journey. So for example, if you get a puppy or a kitten, you will get this kind of week by week programs. Now it's time to learn your puppy to sit or lie or come when you call them, or this is the food you're supposed to eat. And then, so really kind of doing courses, watching videos. You collect points, and these points can be used to getting cheaper insurance or doing other things in our marketplace. And could be everything from now. We also have a partnership with a tracker company. So if you buy the hardware, you would also track the activity, the right activity per day will get points, and you can do streak challenges. So a kind of gamified way of learning more about being a really strong pet parent, reminders about vaccinations. So really kind of gamified way of keeping your pet super duper healthy.
Like gamifying basically being a good pet parent.
Yeah.
That's genius. Like
It's like real life Tamagotchi, isn't it?
That's awesome. Where are you based? How big's the team? I mean, 70, I guess, if it's 1 million.
Exactly. So we have our headquarters is in Stockholm, but we have satellite offices in Berlin and in Paris as well. We're in the 3 kind of capitals that we're based. Where we have kind of central marketing team out of Berlin, but otherwise HQ in Stockholm and more kind of customer operations handlers, speaking to customers, local languages, a little bit more local marketing in each market as well.
And you mentioned international expansion, you're thinking about other markets in the future. Do you have like a target list of like, this is the next market we're going to go into, and then the next one? What is next on your kind of your map of domination?
Yeah, we were actually, our end goal is world domination, but our first goal is European domination.
Yeah.
So the next market would most likely be the European market. And we haven't decided the full order. These are 10 markets and in this order. So we do one decision per time, and then we kind of come back to the markets when it's time for a new one and, refresh our view on, has there been any changes? Which markets are growing quickest, which are biggest, what's the competitive landscape in? So we always kind of redo this analysis when it's time for a new market to see which one looks most exciting and could be most relevant for us. So we haven't decided yet, but several strong European markets to look at. We're only 3 markets so far, so several more to go.
Yeah, there's a lot to go after, I guess. I want to just go back to some of the stuff you mentioned about the AI agents, right? Because I think this is super interesting. And I've spoken to a lot of companies who are just trying to build AI agents for insurance claims.
Yeah.
You seem to have built one in-house. Would you ever think about, I don't know, licensing it out, selling it out? Is that a bit of a distraction, or could that be a SaaS platform in itself?
I mean, right now I think it would be a distraction because we still have so much more we want to do with it. We haven't built it out in all markets at the same scale. We want to go from 55 to even higher. So I think being successful at running a startup also means you need to be focused, and running kind of 2 different companies at the same time, I don't think it's focused. But we wouldn't rule it out for the future, but right now definitely not the focus. And also it's a competitive advantage for us. So let's see how much you want to share it. But right now very much focused on building it for our own customers.
Amazing.
Super cool. What do you think about like the pet market more broadly, right? I mean, I think there's like, at least as an investor, there's like a common story around people spend sort of ridiculous amounts on their pets. It's, they're almost more careful with them than with their children and so on. Yeah. Is that something like, are you seeing that trend continue and increase, and like the baskets are getting even bigger? Do you see a geographic difference that it's maybe, worse, or it's getting even crazier in Europe where it used to be more of a US thing? What are you seeing like in that segment?
Yeah, definitely seeing, as you also mentioned, that a lot of people see their pets as family members. So we have this saying that pets are the new babies. There's a lot of, especially in the younger generation, that first get a pet before getting a baby, or only getting a pet, skipping getting the baby part. But definitely seeing that that's a trend that continues. It's not very kind of sensitive to different macroeconomics. It's your baby, so it wouldn't be, if you were to reduce spend on something, it wouldn't be on your beloved baby pet. So definitely seeing that's very strong. Sorry, we do see it varies a bit by country. So more kind of Western countries, that trend is higher there, but it's spreading as kind of socioeconomic factors improves.
Interesting, yes. There's definitely a growing market across the whole world as countries get richer and people turn to, I think in the UK it's something like there's 1 pet for every 2 people or something. Millions and millions, and people are trading it for for children these days.
I wonder if
Yeah.
there's like you know how like affordable luxury, expensive soaps and stuff are a trend because people know they're not going to be able to afford a home.
Yeah.
Whether it's a little bit like, maybe I can't afford a kid or I can't
Yeah.
afford 2 or 3, but like a dog, yes, I can afford.
yeah.
And then I have a similar experience.
Can't afford like daycare, but I can afford like a dog sitter.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah,
I
I
ask-
heard it's
Kind of sad.
expensive to have kids. In London, so people get pets instead.
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
absolutely the trend. Absolutely the trend. I want to talk about fundraising as well. You raised, I think it was 23 million euros at the end of 2023 from Balderton. Since then, you've obviously seen amazing success, huge growth. Are you thinking about fundraising? Is that something you're actively pursuing, or are you still, given that you've stayed lean, are you good for cash at the moment?
So we're in a very good position that if we continue to stay in the 3 markets we're at, we don't need to fundraise. But if we are keen to kind of go to more markets pretty soon and not wait until we kind of gather up the cash ourselves, then we could potentially look to fundraise. So it's all about that international expansion topic. It always costs a bit, launching a new market, upfront investments. You don't have any customers. You need some people on the ground, investing kind of legal compliance, all of those things. So it's always an upfront investment to launch a new market.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when we talk about your growth and the success that you've seen in the 3 markets that you're in, can you touch on where that growth has come from? Like what kind of strategies or channels are you using to acquire your users in those markets?
Yeah, so I mean, we are actually, Germany is now our biggest market. So Germany is more than half our revenues, even though it was the 2nd market we launched. And I think we've had similar growth kind of strategies across all markets where we focus a lot on kind of the direct marketing. And thanks to our app, we're seeing that our unit economics are kind of better than all our competitors. So that's why we kind of very quickly win each market and continue to grab market share, because since we have this app that's kind of free of charge for all our users, and it creates such kind of like an organic flywheel that really kind of helps both growth. So we are kind of very much digital marketing, direct marketing, with organic being our biggest channel.
And so you're using, I guess the app in itself is a big kind of like preventative piece on pet health. So you're giving a lot of that away for free, and you're saying download the app, use a preventative piece, and then when it comes to the insurance needs that you have, we're right there, we're in the app, just get it straight from us.
Yeah, because for us, it's such a no-brainer to include it, right? Because we are seeing better churn, better customer acquisition costs. We're also seeing better like loss ratios because people don't have as much injury. So it's such a win-win to have it. And it's only the first step for us to be super app for pets, but definitely something that's, can't believe no other companies aren't doing it, to be completely honest.
What is like the strongest acquisition channel to get people to the app? Is it like, is this a social play? Is that like what kind of drives huge, traffic to the app? And then what is sort of the conversion rate into the insurance products?
So usually, actually, people go directly for the insurance. They see the app as kind of,
A gateway.
a gateway. Like
Okay.
if I'm choosing between several different players, why would I not pick the one where you also get this kind of free app? You can gamify your knowledge. You can even reduce your price if you're a super transparent. So it's more like of a decision factor and kind of a mode and something people talk about. So we're seeing mostly kind of the app downloads coming from kind of our customers.
The insurance intent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Ah, that's so interesting. So you're sort of adding it as to the bundle. The app is part of the insurance bundle.
And on that preventative stuff, you mentioned that if they are super pet parents, they can reduce their premiums. And I assume you're not underwriting the insurance yourself. I'm assuming you've got underwriters who you're partnering with. Was that quite a new thing? Was that disruptive to them to be able to say, look, we actually want to use a whole bunch of data around pet behavior, pet parent behavior, and use that to bring down premiums? We've seen that model in car insurance and health insurance for humans. Had they seen it before in pet insurance?
Yeah, so we do actually, it's a technicality, but we do the underwriting ourselves, which means that we do the price model, we do the terms and conditions, but we don't take the balance sheet.
Yeah.
So we are an FJ, so we work with the insurance carriers. I would say it's actually something that made us really stand out, and that I think it kind of came pretty natural to everyone working in insurance that, of course, you have better risk selection if you can avoid going to the vet. So it's pretty natural for them, and they really, really like the concept. But then, getting them to understand that, especially the first time when you don't really have the data of your successes, like now we have data from 3 markets, we have 200,000 pets insured. Now it's easier to prove that. But the first time where you're like, then they could be like, we believe in the model, but can we see some proof points that it worked? And we're like, we haven't launched yet, so you would think them. But that's always the trickiest part with getting the first deal, getting the same with, getting the first investors to trust you with only a pitch deck, right? You don't have any data points. Everyone can understand that this could be something super big and something super cool, but you don't have these data points and actual traction yet.
Yeah, you got to sell them on the story, I guess.
Yeah, the first market was the hardest for sure.
Yeah.
Speaking about like sort of being something very big and very cool, what do you want Lottie to be in 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so we're definitely going for world domination, super app. That's really the end goal. And I think for us, as we talked about before, pets is such a strong vertical. We are not looking to be home insurance, car insurance, and going that. We're more going into the we have all the pets. Let's give everything that they want in this app. That's really our end goal.
Very cool. That's going to be awesome. What are the main competitors in the US? Or are there any?
So Trupanion is a listed competitor that does pet insurance, for example. Then there's some others as well, but I think that's Lemonade also do pet insurance, for example. Usually you see in pet insurance, the pure play pet insurance players usually win because people want to pick who's best at pet insurance because it's a pet passion product. But there's also some, normal incumbents that offer it as part of a bundling.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, that positions you so well to be the super app around pets, since you're not kind of just slotting it in next to auto and other types of insurance.
Less credibility for sure.
And how are you thinking about your team structure? Because I think having built AI tools and sort of proprietary AI tools in the claim space, you're probably indexing more on R&D product development than some of your competitors. What does that team structure look like?
Yeah, so for us, we definitely put a lot of effort into having a world-class tech and product team. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be the biggest tech and product team. It's all about finding the right people. We tend to go more for kind of very senior people that can be self-starters, solve problems for themselves and not maybe looking for, here's a job description and this is what you're going to do today, and really can work independently with everyone in the team. And for us, it's been super important also to not to create silos. So people in customer success can talk to tech or to claims, and really marketing is we need to solve the problem for the customers 360. And that's when you collaborate. So really kind of built a really kind of flat organization, a central team with kind of tech and product mainly based out of Stockholm, where you sit next to customer success, marketing or legal, and really kind of be part of solving those problems from an early standpoint. We were also a lot focused on kind of everyone being able to talk to customers and kind of sit in the customer chat to understand what's the issues, what's the bugs, to really kind of create that culture very early on.
Applications.
Get your applications
engineers, get your applications in.
Well, Hedda, I think we're out of time. But thank you so much for joining us. It's been great to really get to know you and the business, and thank you for sharing that news about your revenue and your revenue per employee. It's always
really
amazing.
Impressive.
Yeah,
honestly,
really impressive.
It's amazing.
Thanks for inviting me. It's been super fun.
No,
yeah,
great.
Same
Well,
for
look,
us.
let's stay in touch. And yeah, I'll keep an eye out for UK expansion at some point.
Perfect. Let's do that.
Thank you.
Talk soon.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
All right, that is 4 out of 4 guests, and
So fun.
so fun, so fun.
I love these pet products. It's just amazing. I don't, but I just love it. It's so cool.
And that is a wrap. 4 for 4 guests. Thank you so much for joining us. A quick shout out to the sponsors, checkout.com, where the world checks out, one of Europe's leading fintechs, and I am a huge fan of them. And Spectre, of course, an amazing tool for finding and sourcing startups. So have a look, check them out. Next week, there's not going to be an episode on Wednesday.
Because we're going to be live on
Monday.
from Bits and Pretzels in Munich. For those of you who don't know, this is like a tech conference during the Oktoberfest in Munich, so sort of on my German home turf this time. We're going to be physically in person with the guests, so that's really worth tuning in. We're going to tell you exactly when, but if you want to see some of the best European investors and founders live with us chatting about the latest and greatest, then please join next week on Monday.
Shaping up to be an amazing lineup. So see you then.
Bye.